Are you trying to figure out how you can sharpen your hacking skills without breaking the bank? Well, you are in the right place, because today I'm going to show you how to set up what might just be the cheapest and the most versatile hacking lab available. This is a setup that not only fits your budget, but it scales and it grows with your skills. Everyone tells you that practice is the key to mastering hacking, but the question always remains, how do you practice effectively when your resources are limited or the setup seems way too complex? That is exactly what we're going to address in this video. I'm going to walk you through every step of creating a dynamic hacking environment using accessible and cost-effective tools. We'll start with the basics, and we will build a solid foundation for your hacking lab to grow as your skills grow. And this is just the beginning. In the next few videos, we're going to delve deeper and we're going to expand our lab. We're going to integrate more tools and tackle more advanced techniques that cover a wide range of hacking skills. We'll look at things like Active Directory and cloud hacking and all kinds of things that you can do inside of this hacking lab. We're going to build this lab in the cloud. Don't worry. It's super affordable and very easy to do, trust me. Are you ready to build your own hacking lab and take your skills to the next level? Let's get started. So this is going to be a fun project. There are a lot of steps to follow, so please head over to the infosecacademy.com, download the companion guide that goes with this, and it'll help you keep track of those steps. You can copy and paste commands out of there, and it's going to make this a lot simpler for you. The first thing you need when you want to start hacking is something to hack. Fortunately for us, there's a site that has just that, vulnerable virtual machines. The site is VulnHub, and people can create virtual machines that are vulnerable for different kinds of exploits to teach you different things, and they upload them. Then you can come download them, put them in your lab, and hack them. Do it all locally, it's all safe, and you can learn. So the one we're going to use is called Pegasus. You can see Pegasus right here, and if you click on it and go to that page, it gives you a download. There's a download mirror here for an OVA file. Go ahead and download that, get it started downloading, and then when you do this, you always need to take a note of this right here, this section, networking. Networking will tell you if the device has DHCP enabled, if it's going to dynamically get an IP address, or if it has one hard-coded. If it's hard-coded, you might have to change a few settings in AWS that we'll get to here in a moment. If it's on DHCP, there's no issue, you're good to go. And the next thing you're going to have to do is go set up an AWS console account. You're going to have to sign up, put in a credit card because you do have to pay for these services. They're not expensive, but still you have to pay. And then you'll be ready to actually start building out your lab. So here I am in the AWS console, and I'm ready to build out my lab. There are a ton of services in AWS. We're only going to be using a few of them, and I'll give you an explanation of what they are as we get to them. The first thing we need to do is we have to set up a virtual private cloud. This is basically an environment or a network that's contained in a little box in the cloud that only we can get to and only we can do things with, and it makes for a safe, ethical hacking lab environment. So in your AWS console, go ahead and search for VPC. We want to go to the VPC, the Isolated Cloud Resources, and you're going to simply create a VPC. What are you going to call this? We'll call it our Hacking Lab project. Pick which IP range you want to use. I'm going to leave this with the default. It works for me because, again, this Pegasus OVA file for that virtual machine, it can take any IP address. If your vulnerable machine had a specific IP address, then in this case, you would have to make this IPv4 scheme match that of your vulnerable machine so that you can actually communicate when you get it in there. You see, what we're going to do, we're going to set up a hacking box and a target box. Your hacking box you can use over and over, and then you can just import target boxes as you're ready to practice new things. We don't need multiple availability zones. That would just be an expense. We don't really care. It's a lab. We're not a production environment. And here we want this VPC and more because it's going to allow us to create some subnets and do some things with networking that we'll get to later that might turn out to be useful depending on how you're going to set this up. And then the rest of this we can leave at the defaults. Then we simply create the VPC. Let it get going, and we should be good to go. We have a VPC here, a virtual private cloud or a network environment in the cloud. The next thing we need to do is set up our hacking box. So to do that, you're going to come to services and we're going to head over to EC2 or Elastic Cloud Compute. This is a place where you set up machines, virtual machines inside of the cloud. You can set up Windows and Linux. You can even set up Mac in EC2. So we're ready to launch an instance, and let's name this our Kali Hacking Lab. For the operating system, there is a Kali operating system in here already. If you search for Kali and then come over to the AWS AMIs or the Amazon Machine Images, they have one for Kali for us. We can go ahead and select that. We're going to subscribe on instance launch. Then you could probably just leave this at the default instance type, T2.medium. It's going to be pretty inexpensive. If this is your first time using AWS, some of these instances are actually free tier eligible. So you could choose one of these free tiers and you can use it free actually for your first year on the AWS platform. For a key pair, this is going to be what you use to SSH into that device to use it for your hacking activities. I'm going to go ahead and create a new pair. I'm going to call it Kali Lab 1. Keep it at RSA, keep that at a .pem file. When you click create, it's going to automatically download it over here for you, and then you have that key that you can use. Now, we have to edit this network information. We need to put this in the VPC of our Hacking Lab project that we just set up. So you choose the VPC that you just created, and it should put in that default subnet, so there's not going to be any issues there. Then you're going to want to enable a public IP address for your Kali box. That way you can actually SSH to it and get to it. Now, one other thing we need to change is this storage. The AWS Kali instance that you get is a very light version. A lot of tools are missing and it doesn't require much storage. You're probably going to want to increase this to 30, 40 gigs, something of that nature, so that when you get it actually set up, we can then go download the full or the default version of Kali onto your hacking box. When all those settings are good, launch your instance, and within a couple moments, that simple, you now have a Kali box in the cloud that you can use for hacking your targets. And we see here we have success. We now have our Kali box ready to go in the cloud. Come back to your instances, we can see that it shows running, but it's still initializing, and it's going to have to go through a couple status checks before it's actually ready for us to use it. So in the meantime, let's get our vulnerable VM set up and get that ready to go. So that OVA file that you downloaded from Vulnerable, that's a virtual machine's hard drive. We have to actually find a way to get that to AWS. And fortunately for us, they have the S3 storage buckets. So we're going to have to create a bucket that we can store all of these virtual machine instances, their images in, and then we can then deploy them to AWS when we're ready to hack that particular VM. So come back to your services and let's go to S3 or scalable storage in the cloud. So let's go ahead and set up our bucket. It's pretty simple. You click create bucket. Let's make this a general purpose bucket and we're going to give it a name, Kali Lab VMs. You can choose whatever you want. We're going to go ahead and keep access control list as disabled, but we do not want to block public access. If we block public access, you're not going to be able to upload to it. So we have to turn this off. And it's going to give you a warning that this is insecure, but it's okay. We're simply using it to store OVA files. Do not put anything sensitive in there. Don't put a text file with your passwords or usernames. Just use it for your VMs. So acknowledge that. Let's disable versioning. Again, this is going to be a cost-saving item. We're going to keep the default server-side encryption. And all of these settings should be good. So then we can go ahead and create that bucket. All right, now you need to take that OVA file or the virtual machine file that you downloaded from VulnHub or wherever you got it, and now we need to upload it. Pretty simple. Come to upload and then add files. It's going to open a window to your device. Go find that OVA file, upload it, and then go ahead and upload. It'll take a few minutes. It shouldn't take too long. And here we have it. Our file is uploaded. If we click it, we can see some more detailed information about it right here. Leave this tab open because we're going to need some of this information, and then go open a new tab that we can actually do some work in. Head back to this EC2 instance, and it looks like our Kali box is ready to go. We see 2 of 2 checks passed. We should be ready to connect to that, but we won't do it quite yet. Let's finish setting up our vulnerable machine. So now we have to use Cloud Shell. I love command prompt. I love command prompt in Linux and Windows, and I love using the command prompt in the cloud. So come to the top right, you're going to see this little console icon. Click on that, and you're going to see it open up this Cloud Shell environment. Now, if you just set up your AWS, you might get some errors about not having permission. Go to the support center, open a ticket, ask them to give you Cloud Shell access, and it shouldn't take more than a day for them to turn it on. Then you can come back and finish setting up. So we have to create a couple files, one to tell the cloud what we're going to upload, what this VM is going to be called, one to give permissions, and another one that becomes our trust policy. So the first one we're going to create is going to be called containers.json. So let's nano containers.json, and we have to put in a couple pieces of information. First, what do you want to call this? Call it Kali. If you copied from the accompanying guide, that's what you're going to get. The format for this one is an OVA, so we're going to leave that. Then we need the URL of the virtual hard drive, the virtual machine that we're uploading. Remember, we left our S3 bucket open, and we can get the URL right here. So you're going to go ahead and copy this S3 URI. That's the one we want. Paste that in, and we should be good to go. So you can just Control X. It's going to ask you, do you want to save it? You hit Y. Yes, we want to write that to containers.json, so we hit enter, and we're good. The next one we need to create is called trustpolicy.json. And what we're going to do is we need to create a role for uploading VMs, and we need to give permission to that role to actually be able to handle that item we just put in that S3 bucket. And that's what this policy is for. That's what you're going to paste in there. Again, you can copy that from the accompanying guide, paste that in. We're going to Control X, yes, to save it. And there's one more policy we have to create, and that is the role policy. So nano role policy.json, and I've given you what to paste into here. And there's going to be two sections called resource, and we need to put in a pointer to the particular VM instance that we uploaded. So again, head back to your S3 bucket. We want this ARN right here, but we only want that first part before the slash, before the actual name of the file. It's simply the S3 bucket's resource name. So we want to go ahead and copy that, and we're going to paste that into here, and we're going to leave that slash. That's important. So if you right click, you can paste, and it should look just like that. I'm going to do the same thing right below, leaving that slash again, and that one has an asterisk after it. We're going to come do the exact same thing down in the next resource section. Control X to save, yes, and write it. We go ahead and do an ls. We have our three files now: containers.json, rolepolicy.json, and trustpolicy.json. That's it. Those are the files we need for permissions. Now we have some commands to run. So we need to create a role inside of our AWS instance, call it VMI import, and we need to give that role permissions to actually handle these VMs that we've put in buckets and we're getting ready to import. And the command to do that is AWS IAM, and we hit enter and we run it. And we're going to give it the access to AWS that is inside of the trustpolicy.json file. Now we're finally ready to go ahead and import that VM from the S3 over to EC2, where we can then launch it. So if you go ahead and run the command for importing in the accompanying guide, or type this in, you can give it whatever description you want to call it. I'm going to call it my hacking lab Kali box. Again, that can be whatever you want to call it. And we're telling it to get its containers, its disk image from this, what we already specified in the containers. So go ahead and run that, and we see that job start. Where immediately we get the status is active, it's working on it, and it's pending. So now if you go ahead and copy that import task ID, we can keep an eye on this. Copy that, and then there's another command to check the status of it. And then you simply put your import ID at the end, and you're going to see a status. We can see it's converting. We're going to wait for this to say complete, and then we're going to be ready to do an import. All right, once that shows complete, we can go ahead and launch a new instance using that image or that operating system that we now have created inside of S3. It's your personal AMI or Amazon machine image. So go ahead and launch an instance. And let's call this one Pegasus. And you're going to come here to My AMIs. And we're going to get the ones owned by you. And you're going to choose the one that you just uploaded. For you, it's going to be the only one there. I've done this a couple times, so it's a different one for me. But for you, it's probably going to be the only one that's there. And then the only thing we're going to have to change on here is going to be the networking settings. We're going to want to make sure this is in our Hacking Lab Project VPC. And we don't need a public IP address on this one, only the Kali box so we can actually access it. and everything else on here should be good to go. It's going to throw you an error about creating an SSH key. We don't actually have access to that box, so we can just proceed without a key pair. They're not going to recommend it. It's going to throw a warning, but we can just ignore that. Now we have to wait for this VM to go through the setup process, just like we had to for Kali. So in the meantime, let's go ahead and actually connect to our Kali VM and check it out. You're going to have to open a terminal or whatever SSH client you're going to be using. And if you click in here, you can see the IP address, and it's going to show you how to connect. So go ahead and CD into your downloads, wherever they are, and your key that you downloaded earlier. First thing you have to do is you have to change permissions. So go ahead and do a sudo chmod 400 and then your key. Then to connect, it's simply SSH, tell it what to use, and you need to connect with Kali at that IP address. It's going to say, do you want to accept that fingerprint? We're going to say yes. And boom, we are now on that Kali box. If I do an ls, there's nothing really here because, again, like I said, this is that light version of Kali. The first thing you're going to want to do is a sudo apt get update and apt get upgrade. Let that run, get everything up to date. Shouldn't take very long. You might get an error about having permissions like I just did. You can do a sudo su change to root, then run that same command, and you should be all right. Yes, I want to install. Okay, updates are done. And like I mentioned earlier, this Kali instance you get is very minimal. For example, if I try to run nmap, nmap's not even installed. That's a basic tool. If I try to run MSF console, it's not on there. There's not very much on here. So what you have to do is you have to install one of the meta packages or the packages with all the tools. And the one you want is sudo apt install. We're going to put a -y because we're going to give it permission. Kali Linux default. And when you hit enter, that one's going to take a little bit of time, 15, 20-ish minutes. Let that run and let it install all of those tools on there for you. In the meantime, we can see that our Pegasus device is done. It's up and running. So if you come click on that instance ID, you're going to be able to see the private IP address assigned to it. So we should be good to go. You've updated, you've got the full version of Kali on there. Both of our instances are up. If we click on it, we can see it's in that private IP address. Our Kali box has a private IP address in there. We are ready to start hacking. So in the next video, I'm going to show you some ways you could figure out the IP of that device if you don't know. We're going to install a GUI, a graphical user interface for Kali, and we're going to start working through hacking that device as one example. There are many, many more devices you can set up. In a future video, I'm going to even show you how to set up Active Directory labs, how to learn to hack Windows devices, and a lot of things you can do in here. But before we go, whenever you're not working on these labs, be sure that you stop them. Go ahead, click them, come up to instance state, and stop the instance. It's going to say, do you want to stop? Yes, we do. And when you stop that, you are now no longer being charged. These devices only run 3-4 cents an hour, so you want to turn it off to save money, even though it's still pretty low. As you start building out bigger labs or adding more resources, then it's going to become even more important that you turn these things off between usage. All right, I will see you in the future videos.